Today is January 30th, a Friday like many others. But 54 years ago in Northern Ireland, it was a Sunday that is never forgotten. It's a very special Sunday, that of January 30th, 1972, especially in a city called Derry, and a neighborhood, the Bogside. There, one of the most dramatic and symbolic events of the Northern Irish conflict took place, what is called the Troubles. The problems? Today we try to recover the memory of what happened that Sunday. A Sunday different from the usual, and that's mainly the fundamental reason for the need to remember what happened, to understand and to never repeat the mistakes of the past. January 30th, 1972 became known in history as Bloody Sunday. But to understand what happened, it's necessary to analyze the political and social context of that area. Northern Ireland, since post-World War II, the creation of the Irish Free State, later the Republic of Ireland, and before that, the island's partition. In 1921, 6 counties of Ulster, the northern part of the island itself, were left under the government of the United Kingdom, the so-called Northern Ireland in Ulster. The population is mainly divided between Protestant Unionists, who are obviously in favor of remaining within the United Kingdom, and the Catholic nationalist pro-Republicans, who have traditionally aspired to a reunification with the Republic of Ireland. For decades, the Catholic community has suffered systematic discrimination in various areas, such as the right to local voting, access to public positions, or simply to employment. Political power has long been firmly in the hands of the Protestant majority, supported by state institutions and security forces, perceived by the Catholic population not as a guarantee, but as a symbol of partiality and advantage, only for one part, obviously the Unionist and Protestant one. In the 1960s, the wave of civil rights movements in the United States also crossed the Atlantic, reaching the old continent, Europe, and Northern Ireland. A peaceful movement had arisen, demanding civil equality and an end to discrimination. The demonstrations, initially nonviolent, were always harshly repressed by the local police. And this very attitude only served to increase frustration, anger, and fuel hatred. Instead of easing the situation, all they did was fuel a powder keg that was bound to explode sooner or later. By the late 1960s, the situation had quickly worsened. Clashes between communities, the repression of protests, and the emergence or strengthening of paramilitary groups like the Provisional Irish Republican Army, later called the Provols, had led to a spiral of violence, to the point that in 1969 the British government, the government in London, had sent the army to Northern Ireland with the stated goal of restoring order. Initially, many Catholics welcomed the soldiers as a protective force, a guarantee against violence, but that wasn't the case. Within a few years, the British Army was perceived as an occupying force, not as a guarantee. The introduction of internment without trial in 1971 as a tool to counter protests and the first acts of terrorism affected almost exclusively the Catholic community, further worsening the situation. The city of Derry, a predominantly Catholic city, became one of the main centers during that period. In particular, the Bogside neighborhood, which was known for being an area strongly hostile to British forces, became a symbol of nationalist resistance in the Bogside. The British Army only entered in force aboard armored vehicles and did not venture in easily or recklessly, always fearing ambushes. Now we reach the morning of January 30th, 1972. It's a Sunday. It's a Sunday theoretically like any other. It's cold, it's winter, there's Catholic Mass, there's an organization. The Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association has organized a march in Derry to protest against internment without trial. It's a peaceful march. The organizers have repeated this to local authorities. There will be no protest in silence, just marching and displaying citizens' banners. They will try to express their dissent towards the public administration, which, instead of lowering the tone and helping to find social peace, is exacerbating the confrontation. The authorities officially discourage the march. It's not an outright ban, fully aware that a ban would only spark a riot. Also, because by now thousands of ordinary citizens, men, women, the elderly, and children, have decided to take part. If we were to paint a picture today of the participants in that march, well, we would find teenagers, children, entire families, civil rights and nonviolence activists. Definitely not troublemakers. On that occasion, the British Army was assigned the role of public security. Among others, a unit is deployed, the 1st Battalion of the Parachute Regiment, with the task of containing the march and arresting any possible troublemakers. The march begins in the late morning with, of course, the gathering of all the participants. People start gathering peacefully, chatting a bit as well. The mood is high, but there's nothing to worry about. Despite Brian Faulkner, the Northern Irish Prime Minister, having banned all parades and marches just 12 days earlier. It wasn't the first protest against internment without trial. There had already been others, for example at McGilligan Strand. You just had to listen to the voices of those who spoke. You just had to listen to people's consciences. Brigadier General Pat McClellan, operational commander of the Parachute Brigade, had given orders to his subordinate, Lieutenant Colonel Derek Wilford, commander of the 1st Para, and in turn to his direct subordinate, Major Ted Loudon, who commanded the company that would accompany the march, to be very careful because the risk of infiltration, this was what had reached the general's desk. High risk of infiltration by whom? By the provosts of the angry protesters, who weren't really protesters, by armed terrorists who would use the crowd to target the soldiers. The march starts at 2:45 post-meridium. Between 10,000 and 15,000 people are taking part, and many join spontaneously along the way. There's no reason for tension. Everything is going well. The English soldiers watch the protesters as they march, cross the streets, and stare at them, staring at them as if they were the occupiers. But there's no malice in the eyes of the protesters. There's only misunderstanding. The faces of the people marching seem to say, "Why are you here? What have you come to do? You're not protecting us. You're only oppressing us." Inside the march, there are also some young guys who, after a while, break away. They break away and start protesting. They shout at the soldiers. They insult them. Someone grabs stones from the ground and throws them at the paratroopers. The paratroopers have orders to use non-lethal force, water cannons, tear gas, and possibly rubber bullets, but always aiming low, never at the ground, never at the head. Clashes like that were common in Northern Ireland, with defined rules of engagement, but eventually things got out of control. Less than an hour after the march began, some paratroopers climb up to a 3-story abandoned building overlooking William Street. That move is seen as a provocation. From there, the paratroopers could become snipers, hitting anyone they want inside the march. For this reason, other young men pick up stones and throw them at the windows. Suddenly, it's 3:55 post-meridium. The paratroopers in the building on William Street decide to open fire. The first hit are Damien Donaghy and John Johnston. Later, soldiers claim Donaghy held a black cylindrical object, a bazooka, but who has actually seen one? A bazooka in Derry in someone's hand? These are just regular civilians, none linked to the Irish Republican Army. Not even 15 minutes pass. At 4:07 post-meridium, the paratroopers are ordered to cross the barriers and arrest the rioters. The paras move both on foot and in armored vehicles, chasing the protesters who start to flee along Rossville Street and into the Bogside. 2 people are hit by vehicles. Even though General McClellan realized at that moment that the situation was getting out of hand, he reiterated that his soldiers should only intervene on foot. Along Rossville Street, Wilford's subordinate chooses to disobey and act independently. The paratroopers have free rein. They start beating the protesters, hitting them with rifle butts, firing rubber bullets at close range, and threatening to kill all the protesters who pass under the barriers. Another group of paratroopers takes position by a low wall about 73 meters away, facing a barricade of debris that, at the time, stretched across Rossville Street. Several protesters, some of them young, took cover behind that barricade. There, too, they had picked up stones and started throwing them. The soldiers shooting at the barricade kills 6 protesters and injures a 7th person. Another group tries to escape, but they are chased into the Rossville Flats parking lot. The soldiers enter the open area, which is surrounded on 3 sides by large apartment buildings, trap the protesters, and open fire. 6 people are wounded, including Jackie Duddy, and a priest is shot and killed instantly. Another group flees to a parking lot at Glenfata Park, which is also a death trap. The soldiers don't even wait to surround the civilians. They shoot while running. They kill 2 protesters. 4 more are wounded. They fire randomly. The paratroopers do this driven by an irrational rage, and it's unclear why they are doing all this. Massacres persist, more civilians are killed elsewhere in the city, and the Bogside turns into a slaughterhouse. Ambulances don't arrive until 4:28 post-meridium, 30 minutes after the first shots. Witnesses report how the paratroopers lifted the victims' bodies by their hands and feet, loading them onto a troop transport vehicle, as if they were sides of beef, pieces of meat for the slaughterhouse. No respect for innocent victims, civilians who had gone there just to protest. John Jackie Duddy, Michael Kelly, Hugh Gilmore, John Young, Kevin McKinley, and Gerard Donaghy were all 17. William Nash was 19, Michael McDade, 20, James Ray, 22, William McKinney, 26, Patrick Doherty, 31, Bernard McGuigan, 41, and Gerald McKinney, 35. John Johnston, the oldest, 59 years old. They are the victims of Bloody Sunday. The news of the killings in Derry spreads quickly, causing outrage in Ireland, the United Kingdom, and the rest of the world. Protests and unrest break out. During a protest in Dublin, the British embassy is set on fire. Initially, the British government supports the army's version. The soldiers, in their reports, claim to have returned fire against semi-automatic weapons used by alleged members of the Irish Republican Army. An official inquiry, led by Lord Widgery as the Widgery Tribunal, is launched. In the final report, he acquits the soldiers. It is written that they basically reacted correctly in the face of a life-threatening situation, but these are all lies. The Widgery Tribunal report becomes the symbol of the lack of truth and justice regarding the troubles of the Northern Ireland issue. Above all, Bloody Sunday, so named, has immediate and profound effects on the Northern Irish conflict. Many young Catholics, who until then had supported the civil rights movements and peaceful protests, lose faith in the possibility of nonviolence and show their support. They go on to swell the ranks of the Irish Republican Army, which in the following months almost doubles its numbers. Bloody Sunday is a point of no return. From then on, the Northern Irish conflict becomes more radical and violent, making everything harder. For decades, the families of the Bloody Sunday victims have continued to demand truth and justice. But it wasn't until 1998, in a more open climate created by the Good Friday Agreement, only then did the British government establish a new commission of inquiry. The Saville Commission, which in 12 years of work heard hundreds of witnesses and analyzed thousands of documents. And in 2010, finally, the Saville report clearly established that all the victims were defenseless, unarmed citizens. None of them posed a clear threat to the safety or lives of the soldiers, and the use of force by the paratroopers was unjustified and unjustifiable. Following the publication of that report, the British Prime Minister, David Cameron, delivered an official speech in the House of Commons, apologizing on behalf of the British government. Of course, these are apologies, they are acknowledgments of what happened. But finally, justice has been done, the truth has come out. But Bloody Sunday doesn't end there. In 1983, an Irish rock band, U2, released a song on the album War called Sunday Bloody Sunday, which became one of the most famous and recognizable songs of their highly successful career. The song is not a direct account of that Sunday, but rather a moral and political reflection on what had happened and was happening in Northern Ireland. Paul Hewson Bono, the lead singer of U2, has always emphasized that the song is not a protest song in favor of any side involved in the Troubles. It denounces the conflict's brutality and absurdity. Through that song, Bloody Sunday becomes a symbol of all wars fought in the name of religious or political hatred. It is a manifesto. It is a cry of pain. It is a rejection of violence. Sunday, Bloody Sunday. The song had a huge impact internationally, bringing it to the attention of millions of people, especially young people. A conflict that until then had been perceived as distant, marginal, a nuisance. Today, Derry is a profoundly changed city. Although the wounds of the past have not completely healed, the peace process has drastically reduced the violence. Bloody Sunday commemorations are now more reflective, emphasizing remembrance and reconciliation. Bloody Sunday remains a historical warning. It shows how the denial of civil rights, the disproportionate use of force, and the lack of dialogue can lead to irreversible tragedies. The Bloody Sunday in Derry is not just an episode in Irish history, but an event that has had far-reaching repercussions. It contributed to the escalation of the Troubles, fueled a long struggle for the truth, and culminated in the official acknowledgement of responsibility. So I want to conclude this video by quoting a slogan coined by Bono of U2 during their concerts while performing Sunday Bloody Sunday, no more, never again. Let's internalize Bloody Sunday's universal message against violence. Remembering that historical memory is not just about recalling the past, but above all, it serves to teach us a lesson so that what happened does not happen again. In new forms, with new protagonists in other contexts, even in the future.